Hey guys, today we're looking at the chestnut or cinnamon cat mushroom and how to grow this guy at home. So this is a beautiful cluster from one of our production blocks. I don't have a kit size on the go right now, so they're just different sized blocks. So when you get your chestnut block, it should look something like this, but you might have the top folded over and ready for you. If not, what you're going to do is just cut a little slit at the top. Oh, I'll do the other side here a little better that way. And the reason we're doing that is when we want to push the air out of the bag, we're trying not to puff the air up all over the block because we want to control where the pins are going to grow. And once there's oxygen, that's what usually starts to usually the location where the pins are going to start to grow from. All right, so I'm going to fold this over like that. All right, and we're actually going to flip it over like that. Okay. So with a clean blade, give it a spray with, it should be a sharp blade, give it a spray with rubbing alcohol. All right, so I sprayed that down. Now I'm actually going to cut a slit from one corner to the next, and then this corner across, okay? So making sure I'm not digging into the block. So I'm trying not to introduce any contaminants or weaken it at all, but I do want to cut the plastic all the way along. So just at the middle, I'm just going to lift it up slightly. Make sure, oh, see, I didn't cut all the way through there. There we go. And then that's it. Okay. So I've got an X for our chestnut block. And now these guys, compared to lion's mane and oyster mushrooms, are somewhat intermediate. They still need fresh air, of course, and high humidity, but they can tolerate with slightly less ventilation than oyster mushrooms. So a humidity chamber, something like this, is always a great idea. Kits should fit really easily underneath this type of thing. In this case, it has ventilation holes, but don't be shy to actually take this off for periods of the day. So, you know, say you're cooking supper, take it off for an hour or two and then put it back on before you go to bed. Give it a mist right before you put it back on so you're keeping the humidity nice and high. And I would suggest always keeping the vent holes open. Of course, this will depend a little bit on the time of year. So because humidity is actually a little bit higher in the springtime in the air, we don't have to worry as much about a humidity chamber. You can probably go for longer periods without having the humidity chamber on at all. In the winter, minus 30, we've got our furnace running all the time. You're probably going to rely a little more heavily on that humidity chamber. And chestnut mushrooms are a little bit slower to grow, so that means it's compared to oysters and lion's mane that are about 10 to 14 days. These guys are about 2.5 weeks. So you have to make sure you're maintaining that humidity, especially in those earlier stages. So the ventilation is less important early on because there's no mushrooms starting to develop. But after about a week and a half, you'll start to see these pins starting to develop where you've cut your slits. Okay, and at this stage, you're not going to miss directly like any other mushroom. You don't want to just have water sitting on your mushrooms. You're going to maintain your humidity all around your humidity chamber on a regular basis. So misting the walls, misting the air above. And after about 1 week, depending on the temperature, if it's really warm out, you might even have a shorter time frame, you'll have chestnut mushrooms like this. So these guys, you can harvest them at this stage. I usually would let them go maybe not quite one full day, maybe another half of a day. So by the evening, if you're in the morning, or you'd wait overnight just to pick them. So I'm just trying to show you underneath. What I'll do is I'll flip the block here slightly So you can see they have this like kind of cobwebby looking veil. This one has fully broken, and at that stage when there's no more veil that you can see, they're ready to harvest. These guys, however, it's still fully closed. So that's why I usually like to wait for an in-between stage, something like this, where the veil is just starting to break. So this probably for chestnut, this only means a few more hours. Okay, so after you've harvested your chestnut block, it's going to look something like this. Just like any other species, we're not cutting them off. We're actually grabbing at the base and twisting them off, because otherwise it's like leaving fruit on your block just to rot. So when we take it off, we're actually going to pull off a little bit of the sawdust, hardwood sawdust with it. And just like any other block, we're going to have to be patient for a second and third flush. So we're going to try and cover that either with a little bit of tape, or we'll put like a cloth or something. I kind of like clear tape just because you can see what's going on. And for chestnut, because they take so much longer to fruit, I find that it starts to dry out quite a bit on the top of the block, regardless of what you do, whether you cover it up in between. So you'll find, and this has been my experience, on the second and third flush, you're going to find that they're going to start to pin around the sides, and they're going to tend to grow towards this. But you might, in about 2 weeks' time after you harvest your flush, start paying attention and looking for pins on the side. And in that case, or near the top, anywhere around, and in that case, just cut a little slit there, keep the tape on at the top, and your mushrooms will be able to grow out. You can try to force fruit it. So give it 2 weeks resting period. That's a general like rule of thumb. After you've harvested your mushrooms, give it a 2-week resting period. And you can try and force fruit it by leaving it in a cooler environment. So whatever you've been storing it in, stick it in something that's about 5 degrees cooler overnight, and then try and allow it to fruit again. Often they'll just go on their own when they're ready, but if you're really impatient and you want to kind of force it, that's a good strategy. Okay, I think the last part to this is how do we enjoy these guys? So, like I said, this is about the perfect stage to harvest. Just when that veil's starting to break, but they're still curled under. Okay, so you're just going to trim. Oh, let's focus here. You're just going to trim the very base off. Right about here is where you're going to trim, because you want to preserve most of the stem. So these guys have an awesome mild nutty flavor, but they're fairly mild, and really it's their texture of their stem that they're grown for. They've got this crisp stem that's awesome in stir fries, soups. Just on their own, we like to eat them.